Alcatraz Island. Just the name sends chills down your spine. Crashing waves, freezing waters, and a who's who of America's most notorious criminals. But in 1962, three men, Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, well, they decided to make their own headlines. Their escape attempt, it's a puzzle that's never been fully solved, and to this day it captures the imagination. We're going to try to piece together this incredible story using the FBI's own records as our guide.
It really does capture the imagination, that deep-seated human need for freedom, even when the odds are completely stacked against you.
Absolutely. Before we get to the escape itself, though, we need to understand what these guys were up against. I mean, Alcatraz wasn't nicknamed the Rock for nothing.
Oh no, Alcatraz, this wasn't just any prison. It was designed to be the ultimate maximum security facility. I mean, just getting off the island, you've got the frigid San Francisco Bay, the treacherous currents. It was a fortress in every sense of the word.
I've heard stories about people trying to swim from Alcatraz to Angel Island, and those were just for fun.
Yeah, those swims, those are controlled situations. These men were facing a whole different set of challenges. Freezing temperatures, strong currents, the added weight of whatever gear they could cobble together. And then you've got the prison itself.
Right, the prison itself. What were the security measures like?
Reinforced iron bars, guard towers strategically placed, and a constant rotation of guards. They conducted over a dozen prisoner checks every single day. These guys had practically zero room for error.
So it sounds like they were battling the physical environment and the psychological pressure. What kind of men even attempt something like that?
Let's meet our escapees. You've got Frank Morris. He was considered the mastermind.
Yeah.
A cunning and intelligent guy known for bank robberies, burglaries.
Yeah.
Then you have John and Clarence Anglin, accomplices in crime with their own rap sheet of offenses. And we can't forget Alan West, the fourth man on the plan. His role becomes really important as the story unfolds.
So these weren't exactly first-time offenders.
Not at all. And the interesting thing is they had a history of trying to escape. They were persistent, let's just say that. And their persistence was ignited in December 1961 when one of them discovered a stash of old saw blades.
Okay, wait, so old saw blades, how does that lead to a daring escape plan?
Resourcefulness. Seeing potential where others don't. Tools were limited, so they had to improvise. Get this. They managed to create a homemade drill using a broken vacuum cleaner motor.
No, that's what I call ingenuity. But how did they even begin to tackle the reinforced air vents in their cells?
It all comes down to meticulous planning. They drilled a series of small holes around the vent covers, very carefully spaced to weaken the metal until they could remove the whole section.
So much patience. And they did all this without the guards noticing?
They concealed the damage with whatever they could find, suitcases, cardboard, anything to blend in. And remember those frequent checks. They couldn't afford any slip-ups.
So they get out of their cells, but they're still trapped inside the prison. Then what?
This is where things get even more interesting. Behind their cells was an unguarded utility corridor. It was essentially a hidden pathway that led to the roof of the cell block.
They had a secret workshop on the roof of Alcatraz.
That's right. And on that roof, they were constructing their escape route. They couldn't just walk off the island, though. So what's their solution? A raft.
A raft? They were seriously going to try and sail to freedom.
That was the plan. They got their hands on over 50 raincoats. Some were stolen, some were donated by other inmates. And they used those raincoats to fashion makeshift life preservers and a raft big enough to carry all three of them.
They were sewing raincoats together on the roof of Alcatraz.
Resourceful, right?
Yeah.
And they even figured out how to vulcanize the seams using stolen hot steam pipes. They got the idea from magazines.
Turning everyday items into tools of freedom. They would need paddles, though, right? And a way to inflate the raft.
Exactly. Wooden paddles were made. A musical instrument converted into an inflation device. The attention to detail was remarkable.
They have the raft, the escape route, all mapped out. It's June 11th, 1962. What happens next?
The moment of truth has arrived. But there's a twist.
Uh-oh, what went wrong?
Alan West, the fourth man. He runs into a problem. He can't get the ventilator grill removed. He's stuck.
I bet he was panicking. What did the others do?
It was a do-or-die situation. They couldn't risk waiting any longer, so they had to make the tough decision to leave him behind.
So Morris and the Anglin brothers, they decide to go for it without West. What happened?
They slip into that hidden corridor, grab their gear, climb up and out through the ventilator. They're finally on the roof of Alcatraz.
So close to freedom, what did they do next?
Now they had to face those treacherous waters. They made their way down the bakery smokestack, climbed a fence, crept to the northeast shore, and finally launched their makeshift raft into the dark, frigid waters of San Francisco Bay.
So they're out on the water, swallowed up by the darkness. Did anyone even notice they were missing right away?
Well, you've got to remember those bed checks. The next morning, during the head count, the guards found 3 incredibly lifelike dummy heads in the beds.
I've always been fascinated by those dummy heads. Made from plaster and paint with real human hair, they actually fooled the guards.
It really was a brilliant move. They knew the guards followed a strict routine, and they used it to their advantage. Those dummy heads, they were more than just decoys. They show how well these guys planned everything out and how they really understood the prison's operations.
It's kind of funny when you think about it, but those dummy heads bought them valuable time. So what happened when the guards realized what had actually happened?
It was chaos. The alarm sounded, guards everywhere searching every inch of the island. Alcatraz went into full lockdown, but Morris and the Anglin brothers were gone. Vanished.
I can only imagine. So the FBI was called in, I'm guessing?
Of course. This was a huge story nationwide. The FBI had launched a full-on manhunt, following leads across the country, interviewing anyone who might have a connection to the escapees.
So what did they find? Any clues to where these guys went?
There were some interesting discoveries early on. They found a packet of letters, all carefully sealed in rubber, that they connected back to the escapees. And along the shoreline, they found pieces of wood shaped like paddles, some scraps of rubber inner tube.
Sounds like pieces of their raft. Did they ever find the actual raft?
A homemade life vest, just like the ones they had made washed up on Cronkite Beach. But no, they never found the raft, or any sign of the men themselves. Not in the immediate area, anyway.
And that's where the real mystery begins. Do you think they actually survived those waters? I mean, we talked about those kids who made it to Angel Island, but those were different circumstances, right?
Very different. Those swims were planned, supervised. Morris and the Anglin brothers were facing exhaustion, freezing cold water, unpredictable currents. Hypothermia would have been a real danger.
Yeah, the bay is known for its strong currents, and the water is frigid even in the summer. So what did the FBI conclude? Did they think the escape was successful?
Well, after years of investigating, the FBI decided that the escape was most likely unsuccessful. The dangers of the bay were just too great.
But they had life vests and a raft. Wouldn't that have been enough?
We're talking about makeshift equipment here. There's no guarantee that stuff would hold up in those conditions. And the FBI's theory went beyond just the water. They believed the escapees planned to steal a car and some clothes once they got to shore so they could blend in. But they never found any stolen vehicles or clothes that could be linked back to them.
So the lack of evidence on land led them to believe that the escapees died in the water. Did the FBI look into the possibility of outside help? Maybe their families were involved?
They investigated everything, including family involvement. But they couldn't find any evidence to suggest that the families were in a position to provide that level of support.
So after 17 years, the FBI officially closed the case in 1979. That must have been a hard decision, leaving so many questions unanswered.
It was. But that doesn't mean the story ends there. The U.S. Marshal Service, they took over the case, and they're actually still investigating today.
Wow. So this cold case, it just won't die. After all these years, the big question remains, did they drown? Or did they somehow outsmart the system and disappear?
That's the puzzle that continues to fascinate people everywhere. And the big part of that is because there's still so much we just don't know.
You're right. So what do you think happened? Do you have any theories?
It's tough to say. I mean, the logistics of surviving those waters and then completely disappearing, it's almost impossible. But then you look at how meticulously they planned everything. It really makes you wonder if they pulled it off.
That's what's so captivating about this whole thing. That sliver of doubt that maybe they did it. And did they become another tragic story, or did they pull off one of the most incredible escapes in history?
And we can't forget about the psychological impact their escape had on the prison system itself. Not just Alcatraz, but everywhere.
You're right. It exposed weaknesses in what everyone thought was an impenetrable system. Did it lead to any security changes? At Alcatraz or even other prisons?
Oh, absolutely. It forced prisons to reevaluate their security from top to bottom. After the escape, they made a lot of changes at Alcatraz. Stricter controls, more surveillance. They even made structural improvements to try and prevent anything like it from happening again. It was a wake-up call. Even the most secure prison isn't foolproof.
So these 3 guys, whether they lived or died, they had a real impact on the prison system. Their story keeps resonating all these years later.
I think that's because it has everything. Meticulous planning, a daring escape, and then that unresolved ending. Did they make it? Did their ambition get the best of them in the end?
It's a question that's inspired so many theories over the years. What are some of the most common ones you've come across?
Well, some people think they drowned. that the elements just got the better of them. Others are convinced they made it to shore, got new identities, and lived out the rest of their lives in secret. There have even been reported sightings over the years.
It's like a real-life treasure hunt. Except the treasure is the truth. And it all started with something as ordinary as some old saw blades. Makes you wonder what other little details might be out there that could help solve this mystery.
That's what makes this case so fascinating. The most important clues could be hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone to connect the dots. It's a good reminder that we may never have all the answers, but the search itself can be just as rewarding.
I love that. So to everyone listening out there, what do you think happened? We've gone over the facts, looked at the evidence, and considered the possibilities. Now it's your turn to put on your detective hat.
Let us know your theories.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more, the FBI article has a ton of information. Vault records photographs, even details about the dummy heads. It's worth checking out.
Well, this deep dive into the Alcatraz escape has been an incredible journey. Ingenious planning, a daring attempt, and the enduring power of a mystery that just won't quit. It reminds us that even in the most hopeless situations, the human spirit can find a way to break free, to push the limits of what's possible.
The case might be closed, but the story of Frank Morris, John and Clarence Anglin, well, it lives on, reminding us that some mysteries may never be solved, but the search for answers can be just as powerful as the truth itself.